You're in an accident with damage to a vehicle that is either expensive or a classic, or it's got some sort of specialty aftermarket parts that you would like replaced with original parts. How do you handle it? We'll talk about it this week on Monday Morning Lawyer. Good morning. It is your Elkton Accident Injury Guy. This is Joe with Bowers coming at you a little early this week because I got a conflict at 10 o'clock. So make sure if you're interested in watching these live that you are either subscribed on the YouTube channel and getting alerts, or there's probably some way to do that on Facebook that I'm not 100% sure about, but you should be able to get alerts when I go live on Facebook. The only way to guarantee if there is a scheduling change or a time change, which I haven't done. I mean, I've been doing this podcast for 2 years. This is the first time. We've had some weeks that we've taken off, but this is the first time we've had to shift the time. We've been on time at 10 a.m. every day. This week, we're a little early. So you'll catch it in the review if you're not able to see it live. But this week, we're talking about higher end vehicles. Some of those Teslas, really most EVs these days, are pretty expensive. You know, the Jaguars, Escalades, higher end Mercedes, Porsches, the really, really nice luxury vehicles usually fit into that category. I'd say a BMW, but you're probably going to have that car in the shop and less likely to get in an accident, but that's neither here nor there. Then you also have classic cars that are usually only insured by a handful of companies if they're going to be insured right. And if you contact me with information about one of those, these are going to be your historic vehicles that are not daily drivers, that are a little bit more difficult to get repairs for. Now, fortunately, here in Cecil County, we've got some body shops that specialize in that kind of stuff. So you probably already know that if you have a ding, a dent, or an accident there, you've got places to go to. I believe they've sponsored podcasts in the past. We'll bring that up in the future for sure. Also, if you've done a lot of aftermarket work on the vehicle, special, grills or spoilers or any of this other specialty type of stuff that don't fall into the absolute standard, you may run into an issue when you get in an accident and you're insured by somebody with minimum limits insurance coverage. Because if they have minimum limits insurance coverage, which is something that we've talked about time and time again, with respect to the injury portion of the claim, it also applies to the property damage part of the claim. Now, we don't handle the property damage directly in our office. We only do the injury claims, but it's important that you have this information, even though we won't handle that claim for you. It doesn't make sense. And if you have a question about it, call our office. We'll kind of explain it. But basically, you only get paid dollar for dollar for property damage. So if our office, who generally works on a contingency, were to take a percentage of that, you'd lose money every time. So what happens when that person has subpar insurance? Well, it's the same answer to the injury question. Use your insurance. It's going to end up being a no-fault claim. Your company's going to go back to that company, and they're going to get as much of their money back as possible. But when it comes to the minimum limits in Maryland on property damage, you're looking at $15,000. So if you've got one of those higher end vehicles that's totaled, there's not going to be enough coverage for one of your vehicles that even after the value has dropped, the moment that you take it off the lot, it loses 20-30% of its value. If you've got a $100,000 vehicle, even if it's dropped down to a value of 70, 15 is not going to cover it. That's math. So what do you do? Well, at the time that you're buying your insurance policy, if you're buying it from a person, an actual flesh and blood agent, they're going to know, hey, you need to have at least this much coverage for this type of vehicle. You're not going to get super high property damage coverage without also having matching or similar injury coverage. So it's a good thing. You're more likely going to be covered, at least better, both on the injury side and on the property damage side, if you have a higher end vehicle and if you go with an agent. If you're buying that policy online, you're going to be able to hit a drop down and go get the cheapest policy. And I don't think, from anything that I've seen or observed, that there's going to be any sort of red flag that says, oh, hey, wait, you're not fully covering your vehicle. Because that online system is designed to be price competitive, even if it gives you horrible insurance coverage, even if it gives you insufficient or subpar insurance coverage. It's why most of the time it's going to default to a waiver of PIP coverage, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and still it has to charge you money for it because of the risk. Go back to that episode. We're not going to get into that this week. So you got that high-end vehicle. You have OEM parts that you want to make sure get installed. There are companies out there, and again, if you call my office for a free insurance review, just that number down there, or send me an email up here at info@bowerslawmd.com and say free insurance review, I will take a look at it. I am not an insurance agent. I am not going to try to sell you a policy. I'm going to give you the guidance that you're asking for. I'm going to say, hey, if I were in your situation, this is what my policy would look like. But then I'm going to say, go talk to your agent, hopefully a flesh and blood agent. And if you don't have an agent or you want somebody new, I can certainly recommend some. There are carriers that will give you an original manufacturer parts rider on the property portion of your policy. That means that you have contracted with them that when you replace parts on this vehicle, assuming it's not a total loss, that you're going to use original manufacturer parts, the OEM parts. The only exception to that rule is going to be based on availability. If they can't get the parts, then obviously they can't just will them out of thin air. But they are obligated to use the best parts available. If they're OEM, then that's the default, and go from there. It's going to help you out with aftermarket stuff. It's important, though, if you're doing aftermarket changes to your vehicle, that your insurance company is aware. If they're not aware, there's likely, and this is different for every policy, but there's likely going to be an exception to which they don't have to pay for aftermarket parts. So make sure that they know, make sure, just like with the OEM thing, hey, I want OEM, you're going to get us extra rider for that. It may be a couple bucks more, but it's what you want. If that's what you want, then you know already that it's worth making the extra payment, and it's going to be relatively minimal because most of the repair cost is already built into the base premium. So you're just paying a couple extra dollars to make sure that your aftermarket or you're getting OEM or whatever is covered. Same thing with the higher end vehicles. They're worth more. You're going to need those higher limits. Also, you want those higher limits so that you don't get sued if you cause an accident and somebody's driving one of those higher end vehicles. The EVs are getting more and more popular. Even though they're more expensive, people are weighing the trade-off of not paying for gas and the electricity, still with the electricity prices going up, being less expensive than traditional gasoline because they certainly haven't gone down. We're north of $3, and that's no surprise to anybody. So the likelihood, if you or somebody driving your vehicle were going to cause an accident, is going to be with somebody with a more expensive vehicle is increasingly higher. So it makes it even more important that you've got sufficient insurance so that you don't get sued personally for what your insurance company cannot cover. As always, that's all we got for this week. Send me an email up here. You want one of those free insurance reviews? You don't have to be a client. You don't have to be a former client. Just be in Maryland, because I'm not going to give you insurance policy guidance on an out-of-state vehicle. Now, if you're in Delaware, if you're in Pennsylvania, I have colleagues there that I will recommend you to. So if you're close, I can get you to somebody. It's just not going to come from me because the states handle those policies completely different. The accident laws are completely different. I'm not licensed in either of those states. I do have an associate who's affiliated with my office in Pennsylvania, and I have very, very good relationships in Delaware. So I can get you on the phone with somebody who can help. If you have a topic that you want discussed here, same deal. Send an email. Don't call if you have something that you want discussed on the podcast. That's probably not going to get that message to me. That's more for people who want those insurance reviews or who have an accident that they're needing to deal with. If there's a question that isn't answered in this episode, take a look. This is where you find all the previous podcast episodes. Just go to bowerslawmd.com. Right up along that bar at the top, it says podcast. That's where to find all the past episodes. It is searchable. So if you have a question about insurance, about handling an accident, anything right there, use me as that resource. If you don't find the answer there, give us a call. We're here to help. That's all I got for this week. Thanks for bearing with me as I chimed in here a little bit early. Have a conflict in a few, so be well out there. We'll see you next week probably the same at the 10 o'clock time. So not this same time, but certainly on the same channel. Subscribe, turn on the notifications, and we will see you then. Be well, be safe out there.